Thanks everybody, and it's good to be here. Yeah, I'm sorry I missed it last year, but I was teaching for SANS last year, so I've got to pay the bills. But super excited to be here this year. Um, and my year has been really interesting in that I didn't necessarily get to work on some of the projects that I wanted to, and I got to work on ones that were completely different. You know, there, over the last year, the quote, the world has changed. I mean, I'm still trying to figure out what happened, but we do lots of things differently now. Uh, and absolutely, I fell down into some of those hobbies that everybody started doing with COVID, like learning how to bake bread, and you know, uh, what were some of the other things that we did? Oh, we all did home stuff in our homes. Yeah, I put down hardwood floor in 2 rooms, and yeah, we spent more time with family, which has been great, and didn't do a lot of travel. And not only did some of the stuff change, personal life and the way I've interacted with family and the way we've done things for projects and so forth. It's also fundamentally changed the way we've had to do a lot of our business from a boutique pen test firm. And that's really what I wanted to talk to everybody about today. Is we did a bunch of work and we learned a lot of things from that work this past year, and wanted to share what we learned with everyone. Because there's going to be some of the same challenges that we have going forward, and we're going to have new challenges. Maybe we can learn from that. A little bit about me, as Trenton mentioned. I'm the director of research and development and a principal security consultant at a small boutique pen test firm called In Guardians. We pen test and do all of the things. All of the traditional type of pen test: mobile, web, API, internal, external, red team, purple team, you name it. We have capacity to do it. Cloud, Kubernetes. If you can imagine it, we've probably pen tested it at least once, and happy to do it again. I'm also an certified instructor with the SANS Institute, almost 10 years, and currently an author. I teach the wireless hacking class, and currently have a new 3-day class scheduled up for IoT pen testing. So lots of hardware hacking, and all the components that go into some of these Internet of Things types of devices. I do all sorts of hobbies. I build. I love working with my hands. Come from a line of carpenters and electrical engineers, and I've recently been inspired to take up some knife making. Uh, I've also been known to consume bourbon and/or rye from time to time. Not today yet, because for me it is still early. It's just at noon, but maybe later. Okay. And I think most importantly, dad, husband, and applying all of those things and hacking to both being a dad and a husband. So, uh, enough about me. Why are we here today? So, what I wanted to do was share some of the war stories of doing penetration testing over the year, from In Guardians, from some of the things I've been engaged in, and some of the things from our team. We're not going to name and shame, but we're going to relate some of the stories and some of the craziness that we found, along the lines of, yeah, we found that, and well, maybe that wasn't
I think we may
all
have
that
lost
unusual.
audio.
Uh oh. How about now? Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're back. Thanks. It's easy
Okay.
to do.
Okay. So yeah, we found that, and yeah, it might not be shocking, but we had to do things differently because we're not on site. Um, some of them were, oh my god, I can't believe they're doing that, and that actually works. Uh, and that's not a good thing. And um, some other ones along the lines of that, yeah, they were doing that and that wasn't good, and it really made us think about how we need to do better moving into the future. So some unfortunate things that happened for us during the year. It has very much been a challenging year for everyone, and wanted to share the tales of some of our difficulties and what we learned from them to help other people get better, ourselves including, so that we can all apply some of these lessons learned going into quote the unknown future. All right. So the first tale from the socially distance challenge, we conducted a hunt team for a power generation company, specifically focused on a largely limited access set of limited access and air gapped networks. They wanted us to go in and examine traffic and some of the devices that were there to see if there were any potential indicators of compromise, any potential misconfigurations that could allow for compromise while being delicate on these power generation air gap networks. And or looking for any unusual type of activity that we might not expect. If there's no Windows domain in this network, and all of a sudden we see uh, NetBIOS traffic and some of those types of things. Those are the types of things that we were there looking for. But where did jet engines come into this type of stuff? Well, as we're examining this network, we found that there were a bunch of very unusual protocols coming from a couple of devices in the network. Specifically, one of them that really stood out to us was FMTP. Or flight management, something I can remember what the T was for, but protocol, specifically J1939. Uh, what this protocol does is allow for network control over a jet engine. And well, we're in a power plant, not an airplane, which was kind of confusing as to why this protocol was actually there. But after having some epiphany, it seemed very reasonable because they were some very large gas turbine engines, and a turbine and a jet engine aren't all that dissimilar. But what the really big one there was that the actual implementation on this air gap network used a set of generic sort of PLCs that had application across a number of industries, from power generation to avionics to you name it, and there was way too much enabled on this particular implementation right from the manufacturer of these PLCs and in this environment. So, like, it's like turning on that HP printer when you plug it in, and you really just want it to print. Yet, it's got a web interface, and you can email stuff to the printer, and it's got Bluetooth Low Energy, uh, very generic and multiple application. But we don't necessarily need all of them, but we potentially do need some. So in this case, a couple of the unusual protocols we found were actually in use, but some of them were not. And the real questions that we got with some of this would, if we were on this network and they're using, say, SMTP, just throwing a protocol out there to control their gas turbine engines, what happens if we start sending J1939 commands to this same PLC, and could it modify operation? Uh, Maybe they likely didn't know that those protocols were there. They didn't. And are they appropriately monitoring for some of that type of stuff? So, an attacker could potentially fly under the radar for sending commands and controlling the stuff when they're not monitoring for it. All right. So, some of the lessons we learned out of this was that, expect the unexpected. And that, we're hackers. We kind of expect the unexpected. And was it really all that unexpected to begin with? And yeah, in this case, it was very much something that we did not expect. We did not expect the ability to control jet engines. Okay. The other one too is, in this particular case, we just can't. You just can't test your theories. For us, uh, this particular ability for us to interact with these PLCs was very much out of the scope of what we were contracted for. And in fact, because it was an active control network, um, we couldn't send packets to interact with these because we could have very much damaged something. The problem is that this is the one that has bothered us for months. Like, could we have controlled the gas turbine engine with protocols used for controlling aircraft? We'll likely never know. Uh, but our customer now has the ability to go and turn off some of these protocols, work with the implementers to reduce their overall footprint. But we, you know, that's the curiosity in us. We really want to know. And unfortunately, for something like this, because it is a very obscure protocol, we may never find out because trying to get an implementation to try it is very difficult, and likely the manufacturers aren't going to want to work with us. I think the big one here is expect the unexpected. And was it really that unexpected? Probably not. But yeah, it was still there. All right. Tale number two. um, what? When? I was talking to Sean the Rapture before we started, and the beginning of the year. Last year, there was a huge shift in the way folks were doing pen tests, and just their businesses were fundamentally changing. They weren't having people in offices, and uh, they weren't having the same amount of money come in. So we very much had a number of customers come and say, "Hey, you know, we were ready to do that pen test, but we can't do that right now. We're on a spending freeze, and so forth." So it was very much a, "Oh my gosh, like what are we going to do now?" Like the work that we just had lined up is no longer lined up. Uh, we were very fortunate in that we had many customers that did have funds available and wanted pen tests, and in fact figured that they weren't going to be able to get in for many months, and were ready to slide right in, and we were busier than ever. So that was particularly great. And one of those that sort of came in a little early, we went through, got all of the contract signed, statement of works ready. We knew what the type of work was going to be happening. We There were multiple phases to this engagement with multiple locations across the United States. We conducted a bunch of internal to in guardians like in brief calls to be prepared for the customer facing in brief calls to talk about each one of the individual components with different groups. We Before any of the testing happened, we did additional discovery calls about how we were going to make some of the technical things happen across multiple departments, using and talking to both on-site folks for the various locations across the US, as well as some of their remote customer support and third party support vendors across all these disparate locations. Okay. I- we probably had 25 to 30 calls with the customer over a 3 month period to go over all the various components. And we nailed down and scheduled and confirmed the dates for all of the components, reviewed them multiple times with the customer. And sure enough, even after multiple confirmations, day one of testing arrived, and none of our stuff worked. We shipped remote drop boxes, a pivot point for us to interact with to do the testing remotely. Uh, and day one of testing comes and nothing works. So we called the customer, and because we are in fact in the middle of a pandemic, they weren't sending folks to the office. They had no on-site resources to go and try to help figure out what was going on. And part of the reason why they didn't have anybody on site and why it wasn't working was that the customer thought that this particular test we were supposed to start on was yet several weeks out, and their third party on-site support that they contract to do many of their support thought it was even further out. So what we clearly had was a failure to communicate. Uh, we thought we had communicated quite well. A number of meetings, a number of follow-up emails, actual responses back from the customer and the third-party support agreeing to those dates. Um, and it happened. Things got missed. We were able to pivot. We were able to work on other tasks and not be idle and deliver great stuff to our customer to help them be more secure. But there was a little bit of scrambling. Now, this was very early on in the year when there was that fundamental shift and that everything was remote, and that even getting on-site resources to troubleshoot some of that stuff was difficult and needed to be planned in advance. So, what were what were some of the lessons that we learned? Um, Communication was absolutely key. um, you know communicate, either verbally or via signal or via email, even though no one reads them, because it gives yourself a paper trail to go back and say, I told you so, even though we don't like to. uh, Absolutely, if we think about 30 calls with our customer in a 3-month period, yeah, Zoom fatigue is a thing. Maybe we did too much. um, Also, in this particular case, adding many resources across disparate teams might have been too much, as in trying to schedule with our contacts, the on the ground contacts, and the third party support vendors all in one shot. Maybe some delegation might have been smarter here. Uh, the big one is that we had some challenges, and um, we definitely employed Semper Gumby, as in be flexible. Having some flexibility to be able to switch to tasks and have backups for your business processes and some of your project management is incredibly valuable when we have challenges to be able to do this. And finding better ways to do some communication is also helpful. I think one of the ones that we learned here was that maybe we needed to communicate a little bit more with some of the other teams directly, and or potentially, if those project managers are a little bit more seasoned on the customer's end, to let them do some delegation on their own as opposed to letting us all manage it. All right, so oh, wait, hey, wrong keyboard. All right, so what else do we got? uh, Tail number 3. The cellular drop box, the box that we ship to a customer so that we can do remote testing, because we couldn't go on site. Getting on an airplane, not so much. Showing up at a customer's office, maybe there is no one there because they've all moved to work from home, to work from home as well. And in many places across the country, we had stay-at-home orders for various lengths of time. And we won't get into any of the politics of that, but it is what it is. We had to stay at home, which meant we needed to find a way to be able to continue doing testing while not on site. Uh, the point being here is that we had the capability for having a small Dropbox computer to be able to ship to our customer that they plug into their network, that simulates that we were actually on site. We'd connect to this remotely. We'd always had that capability. But the point being here is we now needed to turn up the volume, in that if we had 3 to 4 of these, we now needed to consider building our arsenal to 15 to 20, or more. In that we were no longer going to be traveling. This was going to be our sole method of conducting our work. What we turned into, and very similar to that with the tail of the jet engines, um, we were testing yet another air gapped network? And our answer, our comment was, that's no problem. We'll just build a better Dropbox. And in fact, we'll just add some cellular capabilities to our Dropbox so that we can plug it into the customer's network just as if we were there on site and have it communicate back to us over cellular. Um, I, in the future, we could use this as a backup connection mechanism, but right now we're gonna use it as the primary access mechanism to our Dropbox to perform a remote test on a quote air gap network. We can even add a VPN on top of that as well. So if we don't trust the data going over the cellular network, that's that's great. We can rise to this challenge. We've got some of this already. We can continue to do more and add cellular technology. So we built a cellular Dropbox. We shipped it. We got it to the customer. They set it up. It unpacks no problem, but it never connects back to our infrastructure so we can gain access to it. Turns out this particular air gap network is in a physical location that has absolutely no cellular service. I'm like, oh, like now, how are we going to do this? No. So it's an air gap network. We have no connection to the internet. We were planning on using cellular, and our last option just went out the window. What do we do? What do we do? So what did we learn from this? So our primary access mechanism was in fact no longer in existence. The big one we learned here is there's that old saying, do you know what happens when you assume? Yeah, it makes an ass out of you or me, or more me than you type of thing. Uh, don't assume. We assumed that cellular was going to be there because cellular is almost everywhere. But there were some things that we had missed in our capture, and we didn't ask. Uh, those types of things. Is there cellular going to be available here? Is this going to be an even option? We thought we knew. We made mistakes. It happens. Some other ones that we learned, um, you know, and it was at a time when things were changing, and things are still going to continue to change. And I think that the changes for us having to deal with a pandemic have very much changed the way people think just across the board. Not only us as testers, but our customers as well. Thank your customers for being patient as we try new things, and as they try new things. In this particular case, we spent a couple of days together with our customer brainstorming solutions to get this test to happen and implement some creative solutions. It effectively ended up that they were able to pull some cable into this particular area to actually give us an Ethernet-based connection. So, um, the other ones too is that the Dropbox concept was new for many of us in the industry this year. Maybe less on the tester side, those of us doing pen testing by connecting to a remote computer in the customer's network to pivot from there with some of our own tools there, but very much a new concept for many of our customers because many of our customers had been used to us coming up on site and occupying one of their conference rooms and being able to have direct interaction with them. So, uh, but so many of them were very flexible and wanted to work and wanted to get their tasks accomplished and saw that this is a way to do that. Okay. Now, while our customers were very flexible when mistakes were made, and we made some assumptions in this case, uh, arguably they will be a little less forgiving going forward into the future. But I think overall that many folks understand that there's been a fundamental shift in the way business is changing, and the way that we do these things is going to change, and that they will be flexible, just maybe not as flexible as they were over the last year. That said, this is a great opportunity for us to explore opportunities in how we conduct our business now, while so many are still flexible and are willing to be flexible about, both how they receive services, how they conduct services, and how we deliver them. So, still lots of opportunity for us to get even better. All right, this one was absolutely one of my favorites. Tale number 4, uh, packet replay and crashes. Now, I have to be a little bit cagey about, some of the things that were happening here because, if I told you what it was, it would be a dead giveaway as to, yeah, who it was and what types of things it was. Uh, Effectively, what we had for this particular assessment was to evaluate some hardware that they shipped to us and we put in our lab, aka our home offices. Put in our lab to do some analysis on the hardware and how it used the networks and the various um, uh, interfaces there. Uh, Capture network traffic, see how we could interact with the devices on the network in the labs, and could we interact with any of the protocols and or proprietary protocols that they were using. uh, they shipped us some amazingly well engineered hardware that we put in our lab and were able to interact with directly, and found some issues with which they then corrected. They also gave us some VPN access to the lab. And I say this ominously, um, because this particular lab was effectively a simulator for the environment in which these pieces of hardware would go to, and they were connecting us to one of these labs, of which there are only two in the world, uh, and are nigh impossible to ship. Like if we were going to be doing this testing non-pandemic, we would have had to have gone on site and spent a couple weeks on site. But they were able to get us remote access to all of the systems in the lab. And the lab was a full simulator of all of the implementation for these hardware devices and all the other systems in which they interacted with, and all of the monitoring and all of the components back end for management. It was a full solution. The lab was amazing, and quite honestly, I wished I could have seen it. Because they said, yeah, we've got stuff with wires coming off of plywood and attached to computers and doing some amazing simulation, and we've got some custom software that does exactly what the other things do. And like, this screams like nerd hackery to me. Like, I wanted to go see it, but obviously we couldn't. So with that remote access, we found that they'd given us some ability to have a system in there to do our analysis, just as if we had plugged our systems in. Um, we did a bunch of network traffic captures of the devices in operation in the simulator. And uh, we found that the protocol that was in use for the greater portion of the control in this particular environment was all plain text. It had no authentication, no encryption, and no options for any security whatsoever. So, what did we do? We captured some packets for devices running in the simulator. Um, we observed what was happening when that traffic capture was doing. Light A went on, light B went on, light A went off, light B went off. Uh, and then we took that, and at a later time, a couple hours later, we replayed that packet capture of that plain text, no authentication, no encryption traffic capture, uh, completely unmodified, which caused the entire simulator to crash. Between denial of service conditions, uh, in many cases, because something was unavailable, it engaged some of the safety mechanisms so that things shut down. All of the management interfaces crashed. and literally had to be restarted. We actually had to have them reboot the entirety of the lab and the simulator 3 times, because we were able to crash and or create denial of service conditions. Okay. Now, had this been real world tests and stuff outside of um, a simulator, uh, we surmise that there could have been very much been some very massive kinetic impact to some of the actions that we had taken by engaging safety mechanisms in times when safety mechanisms engaged immediately and supposed to slowly would have been bad. um, Removing the HMIs for them to be able to address the problem. So yeah, all sorts of craziness. All right, let's see what else we got. So what did we what did we learn? I think the really big one is that for us it really sent home the message that in 99.9% of the cases, the job that we do as a penetration tester can be accomplished remotely. I mean, if we think about nation state actors and all of the types of things that folks do, they're remote. They're not going on site. It is very much a remote set of work that we do, and by working with customers to get access to the appropriate places, uh, we were able to really find some amazing things that could improve the security of these particular implementations out in the real world. The work that we do as an industry, believe it or not, really matters. And whether we do that from the comfort of our own home office in our pajamas, or sitting on site with our customers in a suit and tie. Oh no, not a suit and tie. We really do to make a difference. Uh, in the case of this particular implementation, this was interesting, um, in that the folks that were building these pieces of hardware and implementing these solutions uh, were using an industry standard protocol. And the protocol is in use by many other manufacturers that are going into this particular vertical. uh, and we made some suggestions about how they could improve the protocol, i.e., this company could become a leader in this particular industry, and because of the testing that we did with their stuff, that they could create a new RFC to improve on this protocol, so that we can have security. They could have security going forward with something like this. I don't know if that's something that they will choose to do, but in my opinion, by spending a couple of hundred or 1,000 man hours for something like that, that they could improve the overall vertical for their security and the products that are showing up there. So give them the opportunity to improve as well. All right, and looking at our last story, the tale of RFC 1918. We working with one of our customers. We shipped them a Dropbox because we couldn't go on site. They got everything plugged in, and the Dropbox worked great, uh, but only for a few minutes at a time. Like, it would connect back to our infrastructure. We could connect to our Dropbox, and we'd start you know do some directory listing and exploring our Dropbox and those connections, and it would work great until we started sending some traffic. And we start running an Nmap scan, um, uh, to do some host discovery, and the Dropbox would drop off the network. We'd get disconnected, and they'd have to go and reboot it for us. Like, just a couple of minutes worth of connectivity, and it would go away. And uh, clearly, this was not going to be something that was going to be sustainable for us to accomplish this test. The problems that we specifically had here is that this test was part of a mergers and acquisitions. So we were doing some testing for a company that was taking over another group. We were testing the group that was being taken over. the new parent company wanted to get an understanding of what they were getting into and where they were going to need to focus some efforts in assisting the newly acquired company in helping improve their security and give them some funding and some resources to make it happen. They want to do the right thing. They wanted to help improve the newly acquired company, but the on-site staff at the newly acquired company saw us as the bad guys. um, they saw us as coming in to tell them that they had done everything wrong, and were very unhelpful and very unwilling to help us keep rebooting this Dropbox because they thought we were there to be the bad guys. What ultimately turned out having to happen was that someone from our company needed to go on site to troubleshoot what was wrong with this Dropbox at a time when you know people are not wanting to travel. People aren't traveling, so this becomes one of those practices that, as a company, we were kind of reticent to want to do. But it was the only solution, was to put our feet on the ground to make that happen. So, what did we find when we got there? Well, when we got there, we found that this particular environment had some public IPs facing the internet, and was natting all of their addresses out of these public IPs. But on the inside of their network, they also ran public IP addresses, non RFC 19, 18 addresses. So not 172.16, 10, or 192.168, and so forth. They ran publicly routable IP space internally behind their NAT. And that's not unheard of. Lots of universities and other places do this type of stuff. But when those folks do that, they're their addresses. In this particular case, the public IP range that they chose to use on their internal network wasn't theirs. It belonged to some other company not related to them halfway across the country, and had never been theirs. They just picked some addresses, quote, at random, or was used as an example in some book somewhere, and they just put that on their internal network. So, as we're troubleshooting on site in their data center, um, we start doing some network capturing, and we ended up trying to ping the box, and then physically unplugged that Dropbox that was there, and the ping step kept happening. Like, there's no way that this could happen. The machine is off the network, yet the pings were still happening. The problem was that there was DHCP in the network. More importantly, DHCP in their particular network was a notebook with IP addresses written down on paper as to what they were assigned on. Yeah, they did manual DHCP. They had no automatic method. And as part of that, they effectively had two copies of this book, one on either side of the office, and they were unsynchronized. And in fact, we had been assigned IP addresses in this non-RFC 1918 address space for our Dropboxes that were recorded as being in use in one book, but not the other. So duplicate IP addresses. And after lots of interesting conversation, um, we got some new addresses on the box, and everything worked as it should have worked beautifully, and it was great. So, what did we learn here? Um, the big one for us that we learned here was that going on site was something that we were very reticent about. I mean, it has been a couple months since this happened, where there's still lots of folks that are being very careful, and I would argue that we are still being very careful. Uh, those discussions around, hey, we think there might be duplicate IP addresses um, from the staff that were on site that were very unhelpful, became animated. And this particular environment had some very strict personal code protocols for the environment, and um, those protocols broke down. Go and do an on-site because of an emergency.
and what we thought was going to happen because of what we discovered about the customers' COVID protocols completely broke down, and folks didn't follow the rules, as it were. Uh, I get that we're hackers, and that's our point, to bend the rules. But there's a time and place to bend the rules, in my opinion. So that first return to going back on site with quote known COVID protocols didn't give us the warm fuzzies, and in fact could have very much put some of our staff in potential health danger, and potentially returning back to home their families. So the things that sort of we were learning there, there were some multiple things. First, 1996 called and wants its networking practices back. RFC 1918 is a thing. Use it. Okay. 1997 called and wants their networking practices back. Yep. DHCP is a thing. Stop doing it on paper. That when I first started in one of my environments, absolutely. I I was handed the book. Here's DHCP, and I said, no, this isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. Okay. Some other things, both like right now and moving to the future, uh, as our company and as companies that we're interacting with to go on site, I think it would be very important for us to understand what health protocol is going to be moving forward. We talk about just moving outside of COVID. We look at all of the other potential health implications that we can help resolve, and I suspect that while COVID protocols are going to change in the near future, I think we still need to have a discussion between, as a company, we need to discuss what our COVID protocol is going to look like and what our staff feels will make them feel safe, and adopt those policies and have that same conversation with our customers and understand what their COVID protocols look like and how they feel that they can be safe, and how we can work together to have everybody feel safe when we start returning back to on-site activities. So, all right. So I was told 45 minutes. I got about 45 minutes. So I want to thank you for having me. A big thank to all the Infosec Oasis team. Thank you to everyone at Guardians, and especially the folks that helped me with the presentation and putting together some of the amazing stuff. It has been a challenging year for everyone, from a business perspective, from a social perspective, from a mental health perspective. We're here. Many of us are still here. We've overcome some of these challenges. If we can beat these challenges, what can't we do? I mean, there is so much that we can do. This quote new normal will become the old way, and the future new normal will be all the better for what we've learned when we had these challenges. So we're just going to get better, and this is going to make us stronger, smarter, more efficient, and give us better
Awesome.
ability
Thank you
to
so
do our
much.
job.
That was awesome. Really quick, we've got a couple minutes for questions. If anybody in the audience has any questions, just go ahead and hit
Thank you very much.
the hand raising emoji, and I'll go ahead and give you mic. Actually, we'll just go ahead and unmute the audience here. We'll see how that goes. Any questions?
It's been amazing. I feel weird because I can't necessarily move
All right.
around.
Well,
Because
thank you very much, Larry. It was great to have you
I
speak.
didn't
If
use
you guys want to,
Oculus.
you can chat out back in the
Of
lobby
course, it figures
afterwards.
this morning
Otherwise,
the
we're going to
kids
have
wanted to play
Grifter
on the
speaking in about
Oculus.
10 minutes.